July 8th, 1941. The German Navy headquarters in Berlin were receiving an encrypted signal regularly passed to the officers in Berlin by a U-boat in the North Atlantic. It was like any other signal, one which was transmitted through a machine of which they had every confidence, the Enigma. This is how the most reliable code of Germany was broken secretly, and how this failure altered the course of the Second World War. The Germans were sure that their messages were totally secure, yet their foes were reading nearly all the words silently. The Enigma machine was a small box containing a keyboard and wheels called rotors, which rotated. Each keystroke altered the electric route within, forming a new letter in each instance and forming an immense variety of potential combinations. Nothing the German officers told was absolute security. They believed that no foe would ever break such tricky arithmetic. The message with the convoy positions, weather and patrol status was coded on Enigma the July morning, sent through the German command system, coded on another Enigma, and buried as routine. It did not appear special in any way, but the same day a man was reading the very same message in plain German in a lonely English estate called Bletchley Park. By summer 1941, the British codebreakers had deciphered German naval traffic nearly as fast as it was sent to its recipient, the head of the U-boat arm, Admiral Karl Donitz. Until 1945, when Germany capitulated, the Germans never knew that this was going on during the war. In order to get a clue of how this could have been the case, the story must go back to Poland in 1932. Europe was on the verge of war, but not yet there in the early years of the 1930s, and the German army had started using the Enigma machine to conduct the secret communication. 3 young mathematicians at the Cipher Bureau at Poland, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rosyjski, and Henryk Zygalski, were not convinced that any code could really be unbreakable. Rejewski was able to reassemble the inner wiring of the Enigma using the intercepted messages, advanced mathematics, and vital information acquired by the French intelligence. He was able to read German army messages by a machine designed by him, which was a mechanical aid called the Bombe, by 1933. During 7 years, the Polish codebreakers had been listening to German military traffic secretly. In 1939, when war was on the verge of beginning and Poland was about to be invaded, the Poles knew that they would lose their work unless they shared it. In July 1939, they passed on their knowledge and copies of Enigma and their techniques to British and French representatives at a secret meeting near Warsaw. It was this gift that saw the subsequent success of Bletchley Park. In September 1939, the Polish codebreakers fled after Germany invaded Poland. However, their findings were taken west. A small estate in the north of London called Bletchley Park was transformed to a hub of an enormous codebreaking activity by the British government. Young mathematician Alan Turing entered the team and adopted Rejewski's concept on the Bombe and repackaged it into a faster and more automated computer in Britain as the Bombe. Perhaps thousands of possible Enigma settings could be tested by these machines a minute. Towards the end of 1940, they were intercepting German communications on a daily basis, particularly the Luftwaffe and the army. But the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, had a more sophisticated form of Enigma, with an additional rotor and increased security regulations. German U-boats were sinking British vessels at a quicker rate than they could be substituted, and Britain was near starvation. In May 1941, luck finally turned. On the 6th of May, the Nazi submarine U-110 was ambushed by the Royal Navy and compelled to come to the surface. The crew ditched the boat, believing it would sink, but the British boarded the boat. There was an Enigma machine and essential code books preserved inside. These documents provided the Bletchley Park with the key to winning over the German naval Enigma in the first place. Thereafter, the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic started turning. Streams of German Morse code were intercepted by the British listening stations every night. They were relayed to the Bletchley Park, where the messages were deciphered by hundreds of analysts who received the strings of random letters and converted them into readable messages. These decrypts were given the code name Ultra Intelligence. It turned out to be among the best kept secrets in the war, only known by a very few of the top commanders. Ultra came out with convoy, U-boat rendezvous, minefield, and even personal concerns of the officers in the sea. British leaders utilised the information to lead convoys safely, avoid U-boats, and strategise counterattacks. Winston Churchill later indicated that one of the reasons why Britain survived and won was Ultra. However, since the German losses increased, their belief in Enigma had not been affected. Donitz attributed his defeats to radar, superior Allied airplanes, and misfortune, rather than to code breaking. His wartime journal frequently talked of enemy identified by radar or other unfamiliar equipment, but never had he any real reason to believe that his code was being deciphered. There were warning signs. When U-110 was captured, Captain Ludwig Stummel increased the examination of procedures and discovered that there were severe security vulnerabilities that might have put Enigma at risk. Nevertheless, he came to the conclusion that it was impossible to break Enigma, since the number of possible keys was so large that nobody could ever solve it. In August 1943, a report by Swiss intelligence, which was neutral, was forwarded to Berlin, indicating that the Allies could be intercepting German signals and cited convoy ambushes that appeared too precise to be accidental. The report was read by Donitz, who rejected it as a joke, and the cipher was mathematically invulnerable. In the meantime, the operations in Bletchley Park were going on day and night. By June 1944, the D-Day, the British was reading approximately 5,000 messages by the German each day. Ultra aided in navigating Allied convoys, tracking the troop movement, and locating minefields. It also enabled the Allies to transmit the fake information by manipulated channels to assist the deception that deceived the Germans on the actual place of the Normandy invasion. The Allies kept Ultra secret to safeguard it. Few officers were aware of the source of the intelligence, and the reports were rephrased to appear as though they were reconnaissance reports or seized documents. When one convoy was rescued, it was termed as good luck. Germans were informed that one of their U-boats had been sunk due to radar or new strategies when it was actually sunk. The effectiveness of this deception was so high that even after this war, German officers could not believe that their codes were broken. Captured officers, when asked about it after their surrender in May 1945, almost always replied no when asked whether they had believed their ciphers had been read. they had brushed off the handful who had thought the idea possible as impossible. Donitz was briefly made head of state following the death of Hitler, and at the Nuremberg trials cited radar, aircraft, and Allied production as the reasons behind the failure of the U-boat arm. He never envisioned that the Allies overheard nearly all messages. The reality remained a secret almost 30 years following the war. Strict secrecy laws were set on the men and women of Bletchley Park, and they were not allowed to discuss their work. They concealed their success, and even their families were not aware of what they had accomplished. A British officer known as F.W. Winterbotham released a book in 1974 titled The Ultra Secret, where it was first disclosed that the war had broken Enigma. This stunned the world, though none more than the former German officers who had had complete faith in Enigma. Karl Donitz was by now a very old man, living in the neighborhood of Hamburg. He is said to have denied the fact at first, when told that during the war his naval communications had been deciphered by his enemy, the Allies. Not until he was presented with plain papers did he mutter any reply and say sarcastically that they had done all that in vain. In 1978, some of the Allied codebreakers met former German officers at a gathering in Germany. The interview was cordial, but emotionally tense. The Germans were not able to imagine such a great operation remained a secret so long. The British showed admiration at the talent and professionalism of the men whom they had lost during this covert war. At this point, historians started quantifying the actual impact of Ultra. According to the conclusions made by Sir Harry Hinsley, a British intelligence historian, Ultra reduced the war in Europe by 1 to 4 years. The Battle of the Atlantic may have been lost, the D-Day may have been postponed, and several additional lives lost on both sides without it. This was a bitter experience to Germany. Their best asset, their belief in reason, rules and precision became their worst asset. Math of Enigma was sound, and what did not work was the human faith that no one will ever manage to unravel it. Intelligence investigations by the Germans were conducted on a number of occasions to establish the possibility of leakage, but each time such tests were reported to be clear that Enigma was secure. They measured risk based on theory and not on what was actually going on at sea. As U-boats were sunk soon after transmitting their positions, they searched on radar or sonar rather than a broken cipher. When the convoys deviated abruptly out of their patrol bases, they thought that it was by chance. The supposition that the foe could read all signals appeared so foolish as to have never been taken seriously into consideration. British, however, began with the opposite belief that nothing was perfect in a system. They did not look on Enigma as some wall that is impossible to break, but rather a puzzle that has patterns to be discovered. Machines and people were to make them successful. Irrationally creative with patience, combined logic with intuition could identify weaknesses in the system by mathematicians, linguists, and clerks. By its highest point, Bletchley Park had almost 9,000 employees, most of whom were women. The majority of them worked without noise and in different huts with only a little portion of the work and never the whole picture. Others also ran the bombs at night, and they could hear the rotor buzzing. Others translated decoded messages and typed them on thin sheets, which were fast lost in most secret envelopes. Key discoveries were made by a small number of analysts, such as Mavis Beatty, such as a 1941 Italian naval secret that assisted the British in the victory at Cape Matapan. Nevertheless, they were not able to discuss this even after the war. Ultra relied on total secrecy. Even the window could be closed, and the Germans would have been able to modify procedures or machines in case they even suspected that Enigma was compromised. In order to keep the secret, the Allies could take severe decisions, letting certain attacks happen in order to ensure that they were not discovered to know about them. It was a death sum. Lose a few to save many. A good number of the Bletchley workers went back to normal jobs and normal lives in the post-war era. They were having a secret that even their nearest relatives had never thought of. Others have perished without having been given a public recognition. Historians needed to re-examine numerous campaigns when Ultra became popular in the 1970s and 1990s. The loss of the Bismarck, the success in North Africa, and the managing of the U-boat menace in the Atlantic were all, in one way or other, inseparably linked to the labour in those nameless wooden huts in Buckinghamshire. Historical records later revealed that some German officers had rather suspected that something had gone wrong. They observed that on some occasions the Allies were too fast to respond to encrypted messages and indicated that operational errors could have provided insights to the pattern of the messages. But each time their anxieties were put aside. This was circular logic because Enigma was mathematically secure. Then any sign of compromise must be not more than a coincidence. This is an indication of a greater issue. German intelligence was divided into a number of brilliant professionals and high-end equipment, but it lacked a culture of self-doubt. The company was inflexible and strict, and it did not welcome serious disagreement. The British, on the other hand, took pleasure in finding unorthodox thinkers. A personality who was slightly out of the ordinary was a plus at Bletchley Park. Mathematicians, poets, chess champions, and crossword enthusiasts joined in, not so much by rank as by curiosity. The open culture that they enjoyed enabled them to see patterns and opportunities that could have been overlooked by a stricter system. After all, the story with Enigma is not merely about codes, it is also concerning the risk posed by being excessively confident. Germans were of the opinion that ideal design entailed ideal security. The Allies were of the opinion that any design, however clever, could be defeated. By 1945, the results were brutal. Approximately 3/4 of the U-boat force had been destroyed, and about 30,000 German submariners killed approximately 783 U-boats. Donitz was credited with many of these losses because of radar or air patrol, but in actual fact, Ultra quite frequently directed such strikes. The radio messages revealed the U-boats even when they changed tactics or patrol zones. It was not Enigma which disappointed them, but their belief in its impregnability. Ironically, Germany also had its signals intelligence service, called the B-Dienst, who were able to crack some Allied codes during the early years of the war. However, when they were reading enemy messages, they never seriously thought that the enemy could be reading them as well. When Allied signals were later lost to B-Dienst, they thought that Allies had been more vigilant, rather than that they had been baffled by their British counterparts. Bletchley Park lessons were studied by the Western intelligence agencies after 1945. Cryptography entered a new phase, and mechanical machines were replaced by early electronic computers, some of them influenced by the experience of the war against Enigma. The theoretical and practical output at this time by Alan Turing formed a basis in modern computer science, such as the concepts of automation, pattern search, and algorithmic logic. In practice, Ultra demonstrated that intelligence was capable of mapping out a whole war, and in order to become commanders, it was possible to act with the degree of awareness which at times appeared to be omniscient. The secrecy is also depicted by the story as a strong weapon and a great burden. The success of Ultra was in German ignorance, which needed to be nurtured even to an extent of allowing the occurrence of tragedies. The human price of false certainty was caught in the response of Donitz when he eventually realized in the 1970s that his signals had been intercepted. He had spent decades researching his own war records when he was convinced that he had been outmatched by the superior equipment and numbers. This time, he must concede that he had been outwitted. The bravery of the U-boat crews and their sacrifices at the sea had been constantly sabotaged by invisible information falling into the hands of allies. The Enigma story became a textbook case of analysis failure in the intelligence community. How even a complete system of command may fail to pay any attention to good indications simply because they contradict what the leaders already think. Enigma was thought to be safe, and the notion was seldom questioned by German officers. Research into big losses was usually inclined to give responses that were desired by their seniors. These false beliefs were fostered by the Allies, who were very thorough in inventing other reasons: radar sightings, patrols, random reconnaissance to their victories. They even made fake operations to make it look like real in some cases. Towards the end of the 20th century, historians regarded Enigma as a prime example of information warfare. The conflict of faith and facts, secret and disclosure, continues to influence intelligence in the contemporary world. Encryption is a war between code constructors and code crackers, but the most difficult decisions are the ones that have to be made on what to believe. The episode of Enigma imparts one of three things that will be remembered. To start with, no technical system is flawless. Human consciousness and suspicion is always required. Second, secrecy may be potent, yet may have ethical expenses, particularly in cases where identification of those served is not possible. Third, the invisible but powerful intelligence has the ability to alter the history as much as any army or weapon can. When Ultra was completely declassified in the 1990s, most of the former workers of Bletchley Park were already long dead. Their legacy, however, continues to exist in every single computer today, in every single encrypted message, and in every one of the intelligence agencies that now not only studies codes, but also persons and concepts behind the codes. In the war, the Germans had not realized that their insurmountable code was broken, and not all of them survived to know the truth later. In retrospect, history reveals that some of the greatest battles of the Second World War have been fought not just on the land, sea, and in the air, but also in the mind between doubting and believing, questioning, and having blind faith. If you found this hidden side of World War II interesting, consider sticking around for more stories like this, where small decisions, quiet rooms, and unseen people change the fate of nations.